You know what? This map box might. Nope. I mean, I don't need it. Screw it. Yeah, it's too wide. The left is too wide.
I'm not. It's way light.
Becky sent me this song probably 13 or 14 years ago. I was doing a record, and she sent me a whole stack of material. And I saw this song about Old Butler. My mother-in-law's family, they're all from Old Butler, and they had to move away.
It's the only town in the United States that was ever completely covered up as part of a controlled flood. The TVA did it in 1948 because there was so much flooding in the valley. I think it was earlier, maybe 3 or 4 years before that, 9 or so people got killed in Butler because of the flood. So they decided in order to control the river, they would flood the entire valley.
People had to pack up and leave their homes, places where generations had lived. And they, as part of reposition, they had to exhume bodies. They had to dig up all of the graves and move them to higher levels.
So they moved the town and then flooded it. And so it was a big event. And then it was a big event when they drew it down 35 years later.
It's been a thrill to get to write with Tim every so often.
Thrilled when she asked me.
There's a long and glorious tradition of murder ballads in bluegrass music and before in old time, and so we're just adding to that. It's just what you have to do as a bluegrass songwriter.
They say in country music, if you play the records backwards, you get your car back, get your wife back. If you play bluegrass records backward, your wife comes back from the dead. So that's what we did with this song. We just decided once we got into writing, I do remember this, that we thought, hey, let's make the preacher the bad guy. Make him the one who murders his wife and decides, hey, they're flooding the town and they'll never find her. It's totally fictional.
Historical fiction.
Yeah, no preachers' wives were left under the cornerstone.
Right.
Well, you seem to remember when we wrote the song that I mentioned something about the cornerstone of the church.
Yeah, that really happened. The church wanted to go down and grab the cornerstone from the old building.
Well, I remember us talking about that and we think, well, what if there's something under the cornerstone, And then we killed her off right there.
Yep.
And put her under there.
Yep.
35 years later, and all I think about is what's coming up when the water goes down. What's coming up when the water goes down. What's coming up when the water goes down.
This is going to be put out by East Tennessee State, and actually through the Bluegrass program under the auspices of the Appalachian Studies program. And they have their own label, and so they're set up and ready to do that. And it's great because the pride bands at ETSU that Dan Boner directs have had some great musicians come through there, and they work so well together and have a great sound. And I'm glad that one of the better bands that he's had is who's going to get to cut this.
The ETSU Bluegrass Pride Band always, we always have great students that are performers in that group. But this semester was particularly special, and I thought that, hey, maybe this would be a good song to do and to tell the story. And of course, I thought about Tim and Becky. They're a couple of our star alumni.
I was in the first ETSU Bluegrass Band when Jack Tonal was at ETSU, and he put together myself and Richard Blaustein and a couple other folks, and we played a show for official dinner there at the college. And then Jack decided he wanted to start teaching classes related to the music. And so I would come in and sit in when they would rehearse and stuff like that. And that's how I got involved in the ETSU program way back then. And Becky came in later. Not sure when.
Yeah, I came in '97, and I was so excited to hear about a place where I could get credit for playing bluegrass music, because I'd grown up playing music with my family, and it was really my ticket to move to Tennessee. I wouldn't have had the gumption to pull up from Minnesota and move to Tennessee if it hadn't been for the bluegrass program. But I was part of the Pride Band, and got to play at the Kennedy Center, got to go to France, and graduated in 2001 with a PR degree and a minor in music.
They do so much to help promote our program at ETSU, and they're such incredible songwriters and musicians in their own right. So I thought, well, why don't we bring them back, and we'll record the song together with them. And of course, we've got Adam Miller singing, who is, you can hear, he's just an exceptional voice.
1, 2, 3. Changed the course of the water and flooded the town. Watched from the banks of the river when old Butler went down. I led a prayer for the living and all we'd left behind. Anything to ease a troubled mind. As I gave the message, I started to cry. If they asked me any questions, I wouldn't have to lie. I'd say Margie left the valley sometime in the night. She was homesick for the city life. I always knew she'd never make a preacher's wife. Jesus said one day the dead would rise up from the ground. You can't bury memories that won't drown. 35 years later, and all I think about is what's coming up when the water goes down. We never thought we'd ever see old Butler Town, but they had to fix the dam, so the water's coming down. And now my congregation wants to raise the cornerstone. Some things are better left alone. I guess it's time to reap the seeds I've sown. Jesus said one day the dead would rise up from the ground. You can't bury memories that won't drown. 35 years later, and all I think about is what's coming up when the water goes down. Thank the Lord above and the TVA. I can't depend on either one to help me anymore. Carter County Sheriff's at my door. Jesus said one day the dead would rise up from the ground. You can't bury memories that won't drown. 35 years later, and all I think about is what's coming up when the water goes down. What's coming up when the water goes down. What's coming up when the water